Hey, howdy, welcome. I am so glad you're here to listen to me ramble about my art and my characters and the story that I'm writing. So kind of a little about my project. So I've been working on Salunatics since my sophomore year of high school, which was a good amount of time ago. Oh my god. Originally, it was supposed to be a steampunk western comic, because we mainly see it's set in Victorian Britain instead of America, that kind of thing. So I wanted to try and be different. So now, of course, it's morphed into a more quote-unquote realistic comic. It's more similar to your typical Western, with fantastical stories and characters, kind of think Red Dead or Western movies, Western books, Western Old West media as a whole, where a lot of history is lost. Red Dead does a really good job, but that's kind of the main one. But I have included a lot of historical facts of the medical history and tragedies that happened during this time, historical tragedies. A lot of the characters have experienced life through these tragedies, and then they've of course seen the world grow and set back within true history, because the stuff is really interesting. I've always found history, more specifically the American West history, really interesting. I love Idaho history, Northwest and West Coast history, because I've lived on this side of the country for my entire life, specifically in Idaho. I've always had a lot of interest in the development of where I live. I could talk about that for hours, but I'll save that for another video or something. Or maybe never, who knows. Anyway, so I wanted to combine history with a good story, so, I could keep researching for something instead of just info dumping to people. So I'd like to start with character introductions. I don't know if I'll do one video per character, but we'll give it a try, see how that goes. So I figured I'd start with a character that I first started designing characters. He was one of the first. So Anthony De Rosa is my first character. I know I said that so white, please forgive me. Anthony has been in the story since the very beginning, and his original name, it was, oh my god, I can't believe I'm saying this. His original name was Anthony. I wanted it to be a weird name. Oh my god, it's so cringe. Anyway, but then I was actually, he's gonna have a normal name because Anyway. So Anthony's, physical design hasn't changed a lot. Here's some of my old designs. Oh my god. Anyway, without that art, I wouldn't be where I am today, but I still look back and I'm oh. I feel like a lot of artists go through that, but anyway. His eye patch has stayed the same just because I kind of wanted to keep, a bit of his old design. But, he no longer has piercings, his height has changed, he's a short king, he's 5'3". And then, obviously, his clothing and his fashion has changed quite a bit. So, some of the, most recent design choices, in the past few months, don't show up in a lot of, not a lot, but just some of the, speed draws that I have up, they don't show up. So, forgive me. But, for example, Anthony has a horseshoe tattoo on his right arm. It just says good luck, because he's always thought to himself that, oh, I attract bad luck. So he wanted something to attract some good luck. But after losing his right eye, he kind of counted the tattoo as bad luck. But baby, this is the 1890s. That shit went nowhere. He's stuck with that. He's a very superstitious person. Extremely superstitious. So he goes to another posse member to help him out, to, balance that out. And baby, trust me, I will make a Devil's Posse video. I promise. I swear. If y'all want that, of course. But anyway. or if I want that, because it's my choice. But anyway, so his overall personality has changed a lot since the original start, which is good, because who was that man? Who was that man? Nobody liked him for a reason. Like, he didn't really have any redeeming characteristics. He wasn't very likable. And as the creator, you're supposed to like your characters. And, I mean, at that time, I was, like, a teenager, and I was like, ooh, he's gonna be so brooding, and, like, I'm so tough, and, like, like, the typical, Anyway, like, he's very arrogant, high and mighty, very rude. Like, we all know characters like that, where it's kind of like, you have nothing good about you. Okay. So, nowadays, Anthony has become far more fleshed out of a human being, instead of just, like, your typical asshole. He's not so 2D anymore, he's more 3D, he has reasons for his reactions, things like that. I make my OCs take the Myers-Briggs test. I ask them politely and do, like, different questionnaires, like, just kind of figuring out their flaws, why they are that way, like, really deep character digging, because it just makes them more interesting, more relatable. The Myers-Briggs test, Anthony's personality is ISTJ-T, so he's 84% introverted, 64% observant, 62% thinking, 60% judging, and he's 93% turbulent, which, to be honest, I can't remember what turbulent means, and that's so dumb, but whatever. Anthony isn't particularly, like, flashy or attention-seeking, like, obviously, because he's introverted, but he does his work to keep his world sturdy. Anthony can be judgmental. He can be so judgmental, but he doesn't really verbalize a lot of his observations. Like, he doesn't really want to make anyone feel less than, but doesn't really appreciate, like, when people are, acting the way they shouldn't. Or in his mind, they shouldn't. I don't know what I'm trying to say. So, like, if he has major beef with people, even then, he, like, tones it down a little bit, but he'll be a little bit more snarky and rude. Anthony rarely hesitates to take responsibility for his actions, his choices, what he says. He's quick to own up. He believes honesty is more important than showmanship, so he'd rather satisfy his own conscience than lie to impress someone. And again, judges hardcore of, like, people who don't own up to what they've done. And then Anthony's dedication is an admirable quality, and it drives a lot of his accomplishments. It can be one of his weaknesses, though, because he lets others take advantage of him a lot. Whether it be shouldering others' responsibilities, or, like, getting work done, or even forgiving far too quickly. He doesn't complain even if he ends up exhausted or discouraged. Some of his strengths and weaknesses, he's obviously very honest. He's not super direct about, like, his, like, dislikes, but he's honest about, like, his opinions. He's very strong in his opinions. He doesn't really hold back. He's strong-willed and dutiful, very responsible, and then he's also a jack of all trades. Anthony can pick up on pretty much any skill that he either needs to or wants to, and can do it pretty quickly, but it also discourages him if he can't. Sorry, I just put on lip gloss. If he can't, like, do it the first time right. He's very hard on himself. Some of his weaknesses: he's very stubborn, extremely stubborn. Like, if you're trying to get Anthony somewhere that he doesn't necessarily want to go, he's going to dig his heels in, and he will let you know how he feels about it. He's always by his book. Like, again, honesty is the best policy. He sees people who, which I know for an outlaw is contradicting, but he's truthful when it matters to him. Multifaceted. Often unreasonably blames himself for a lot of things. Again, he can be really hard on himself, he beats himself up. even things out of his control, he kind of blames himself for. Just some random fun facts about Anthony. Number one, he's a fish nerd, baby. Anthony really enjoys fishing and jumps, like, at any chance he can. He's well aware of species, like areas those species exist in, which waters carry what temperature, what times are the best, what baits are the best, what weather is best to fish in. Now, I gathered a lot of inspiration from my personal life and Red Dead Redemption. Shocking, I know. But some of my favorite side missions are fishing with other camp members. Like, one of my favorite fishing side missions is when you go out with Javier and Arthur just kind of, like, shits himself and is like, I'm such a bad fisherman. And then Javier's like, no, it's just the bait. Like, also, like, where Kieran and Arthur go out and go fishing, and then Arthur just, like, roasts the hell out of Kieran for pretty much no reason. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Forgive me. Anyway, but I gathered a lot of inspiration for Anthony from that. Like, Anthony loves to fish, and he wants to take anyone else who will go. If they have questions, Anthony is always open to answer. Anthony has 2 cats. Love cats, but both cats were barn cats that Anthony pretty much just brought inside. Like, they still obviously free roam around the ranch, but they go home to Anthony. Pastel, when she was a kitten, she looked like a little caramel. So Anthony named her Dessert. Pastel means dessert in Spanish. But now she's like a fat kitty. And the gang kind of pokes fun at her because she's kind of lazy and she lays around. And Anthony obviously is like, don't say that. Because, okay, ew, personal side story, ew, no one cares. When I was a little kid, my aunt had this cat. She got really fat. And so I, like, walked up to her. Bro, kids. So I walked up to her and was like, Elliot is fat. And my aunt went, don't say that about her. And so I said, okay, Elliot is plump. And my aunt was like, no, she's not. She's healthy. Anyway, so, shout out. But, like, Anthony kind of has the same mentality of, he's like, don't call my baby fat. And then he has another kitty, calico, named Oxidado, which in Spanish means rust-covered, but it's, in essence, rusty. So he reminds, Oxidado reminds Anthony of, like, a little rust-covered something, because he's got little orange spots all over him. Oxy, he calls him Oxy for short, sleeps on Anthony's, like, bed at night, and usually follows him around. Anthony's horse is named, please forgive me, Truenos, which is thunder. She's a black and white paint. Fun fact about me, I can't draw horses, which is ironic, because what else were they using back then? Anyway, Anthony doesn't speak a lot of Spanish. Like, he'll speak Spanish with his coworkers, with friends, obviously with his family, but he doesn't speak a lot of Spanish outside of people he knows he can trust. Unfortunately, due to the times of this period, like, racism was rampant, and people were just ignorant. But Anthony, like, all of his notes are written in Spanish. He doesn't really keep a journal, but he keeps just thoughts down. Those are all in Spanish. All of his pets are named in Spanish. A lot of his, like, kind of mutterings to himself are in Spanish. But again, unfortunately, he has to be careful. I figure from there, we could do Anthony's backstory. I'm gonna sum it up a little bit, because he's 23, so he's lived not, like, a lot of life, but enough. So, July 10th, 1867 is Anthony's birthday. So he was born in Tennessee, and his parents had just recently moved to America. So his mom is from Scotland, her name is Leosa, and his dad, Augustin, is from Mexico. So Augustin and Leosa kind of met in Tennessee and then ended up getting married. They obviously, again, due to the times and the ignorance of people, they were not really welcomed in a lot of towns, and people were extremely rude. This was also right after the Civil War, so a lot of crazy stuff went on. So Anthony's family finds a small town that's been built up by other immigrants and other, like, natives and people who've been chased out from their homes because of stupidity and ignorance. So, racism. So they lived there for a good few years, till 1870. So it's more like tents and wagons, like people living out of their tents and wagons, because it's a traveling town just in case. About 3 years later, everyone is there. They don't really cut down trees. There's not much of a reason to. Some people have built houses since it's been about 3 years, but Anthony's parents are really cautious to get comfortable or set down roots in a place. Town is gonna be found out someday. So obviously somebody finds them, and, there's no money, there's no taxes, there's no politicians. They live by themselves. Like, they trade with each other. They don't really rely on anybody but each other. It's a good community. How awful. Obviously, these people gather a group and attack, so a lot of people end up leaving. Anthony's family decides to head west, since they've heard that things in the west and the northwest are a little bit better. Not that things were really good, but they were not quite as bad. They end up traveling, and I think it said it takes about a month of traveling to get from Tennessee to Wyoming. I think. I could be wrong. Anyway, so in 1871, Anthony is 4 years old. His parents are doing his best to make things, normal for their son. Leosa's trying to find a good job. Augustine's trying to find a good job. Augustine has cowboying experience. Leosa is a good seamstress. So in Wyoming, they do find a job, both of them. So Leosa has a seamstress job where Anthony kind of grew up around this job, and Augustine finds a job at a local general store. So they sell dry goods, tobacco, fresh food, typical general store stuff. Candy, stuff like that. The general store owner and Augustine get along really well. Leosa likes her seamstress job. Anthony kind of remembers bits of the move, but obviously at 23 you're not going to remember tons from 3 or 4 years old. In November, his little sister is born, so they are 5 years apart. Unlike Anthony looks a lot like his dad, except for he has blue eyes. Fowlin is like her mom. She's got red hair, kind of paler skin tone. She looks a lot like Leosa, but she has brown eyes. So Anthony and his sister are pretty close from then on. So after working for a few years and saving up, they end up purchasing land and kind of starting a small farm on it. So no animals, just crops. Anthony, as a ranch kid, a farm kid, kids that grow up in those environments, they learn to do chores or harvesting, driving a tractor really early on. Augustine is not a super big fan of steam-powered stuff because in his mind it takes us further from nature, so he's like, you're gonna use the horses. Anthony is driving the combine, which was pretty much just an attachment to a wagon of sorts, I think. I'll correct myself later. Anyway, so due to a rusting seat and then Anthony kind of pushing the team a little too hard, he falls and his face gets shredded by the combine. So nothing really comes out of it other than his right eye becomes blurry. It just kind of grazed the eyeball. I don't know. So it just kind of blurred his vision, but otherwise he can still see. his face heals up, so there's not really anything lasting there. 1877, his younger brother is born, Luis. Yeah, they're like 10 years apart. So anyway, obviously Anthony isn't super close with his little brothers, but Anthony starts skipping school with his friends and getting into trouble. Like, not necessarily anything illegal, but like, they're skipping school and just going and hanging out in the woods and going fishing and maybe trespassing a bit. When he is 13, so about 3 years later, so in 1880, he gets into some big trouble. They've gotten into more illegal things like stealing and more trespassing, but like destruction of property, smoking and drinking and getting into all kinds of things, or sneaking into the saloons to play games. And so Anthony keeps bribing his sister to keep quiet about him skipping school. He's so far kept it mostly out of his parents' view. But then at 15, so in 1882, Anthony's youngest brother is born. Anthony's alcohol addiction is pretty prevalent. So, like, he doesn't go to this, Anthony doesn't really go to the store anymore, he doesn't sell fish, obviously isn't going to school. He's going to the saloons with his friends, they play poker and darts, and they drink and smoke. But, like, Anthony is out every night drinking. So his parents are like, you gotta get out, because, you know, this is no way to be an example for your siblings. Ew, siblings. Ugh! Being an example for your sibling. Gross. Like, initially, Augustine kind of counted it on just being young, but then when Anthony was like, you know, this is clearly a problem, he agreed that Anthony needed to leave. So Anthony heads to a party town, and pretty much just drinks and is in a drunk haze there for about 5 months. So then a British pirate comes in and is like, yo, what the fuck? Why is there a kid in here? And everyone's kind of like, that's just Anthony. We have no idea where he came from. So he's like pretty disappointed in the town, so he just takes Anthony to his camp and tries to help him out in 1883. So he's about to turn 16, or he has turned 16. As he's helping Anthony, Anthony starts to, you know, get some memories back, and he starts remembering his family, which is why he started drinking so heavily in train car. So he sneaks out and goes back. Now, Anthony finds all of his buddies, which are kind of kids his age, like 16, 17, 18, 19, you know, still in their teen era. Anthony's always struggled with his sexuality. This night that he sneaks out, he attempts to kiss one of his friends because he's had a crush on him for a little while. Due to the times and due to the ignorance and stupidity of people, obviously they don't take this well, so they take him out and beat him half to death, and they throw him into the well. So the blacksmith comes out and finds him, gets him out of the well, is like, you can't be here. Like, we need to get you further from here because this is not a good place for you. He takes Anthony to a friend that lives kind of near the Idaho-Wyoming border. At this point in time, Idaho and Wyoming aren't states yet, though, so it's pretty much just like going to one town from the next. He lives here, he starts to sober up. He really misses his family. He's feeling extremely homesick. He's become like a very, very quiet person. At 17, he's been a year sober. The blacksmith offers him a apprenticeship, and he takes it because he wants to, for one, prove to his family that he's worthy of being home, and for two, he kind of wants to prove to himself that he can do this and that he is worth something. Obviously, due to Anthony's personality, he spends a lot of time just thinking and shitting on himself and ripping himself to shreds, which isn't healthy, but, you know, we all learn things, and we all have to unlearn things. So into the apprenticeship, it's been about a year. Anthony is well-versed in the blacksmithing world, so he's pretty aware of how the, you know, like, horseshoes are made, and blades, and things like that. So he enjoys this work, but he is ready to go home. And now that he's proved it to himself, he's kind of thinking, maybe I can prove it to my family. So he ends up making his dad a knife and then tells the blacksmith, I am gonna go home. And the blacksmith is like, okay, let me drive you. So Anthony arrives home, knocks on the door, and is kind of expecting like a cold welcome. But his family embraces him and they throw a party because they're happy to have their son back home. A couple months later, kind of in December, since Anthony left, the little farm has turned into a more profitable business. Augustin has now also taken over the shop, so he sells his own produce, and then of course like beef and other like community commodities, things like that. But his father is like, I don't think I can pay you a livable wage. But he's heard of a ranch called Hell's Ranch up near the Eagle Rock settlement, which is Idaho Falls today. So Anthony decides to move up there because he needs money, obviously. And when he moves up there, he goes to the owner of the ranch and explains that he's got farm work for his entire life. So obviously they hire him on. So in Anthony's initial time in the ranch, he makes a lot of good friends there. He is pretty easy to get along with. He likes the fact that he can, for one, speak his native language around other people. Also, a lot of cowboys back in the day were minorities because it was a job that accepted a lot of people. Wasn't great pay. Work was work. So, Anthony meets Chester while he's on guard duty, which on Hell's Ranch, which I will do a probably like shorter video about. There is a secret house for the outlaw gang. There's guards walking around the ranch all night and all day, but a lot of the guys just count it as watching for cattle rustlers, or so they just kind of count it as, oh yeah, we do that. But Anthony is like, I've never seen this guy working on the ranch, but then he just kind of thinks, oh well, he's probably just a cattle driver or something under a contract, things like that. So Anthony and Chester make up a pretty good friendship. They talk and kind of joke around. They play cards, they play poker, that kind of thing. In Anthony's early days at the ranch, he's a little bit of a hothead. He can get pissed off pretty easily, and people like to push his buttons because they like to see this 5'3" man attack people. Ray is kind of like, hey, if you want to make more money, you should join my posse, my outlaw gang. You'll make more money, have more freedom, and you won't be as tired. And Anthony takes it. He's like, well, I need more money, and maybe there's a bit of adventure here that he can take on. They enter, there is a ceremony that they do to initiate, in essence, thing that they do. Now, before I fucking say it, I swear to God above, I did not take this from Yellowstone. I swear to you, I thought I had an original idea when I initially created this, and then I watched the little of Yellowstone that I did, and bro, I was devastated. I was like, no. They get branded in. Hell's Ranch has a very distinct brand, but the guys get branded in, so for one, they can't go to any other gang. For two, Ray isn't exactly the best person on the planet, and he views these people as his, like, they are, in essence, his property. So they get branded in for that reason as well. Anthony is now 20, so in 1887. So Anthony is unfortunately more aware about Ray's doings than he should be. He accidentally intercepted a letter, and obviously there wasn't any name on it, so he just figured he'd open it and then give it to whoever. A crime, a federal crime, even though he robs banks, but whatever. So he opens it and reads over it and realizes Ray has been lying to them this entire time. Again, I'll go over all of that in the Hell's Ranch video. Be patient. Anyway, so he approaches Rayford and is like, excuse me, what the fuck is this? You're lying. And Rayford is like, you better keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you. Anthony, again, doesn't really like when people tell him what to do, so he starts yapping about it. He starts telling everybody about it. He starts telling everybody that Rayford is lying. So, after, like, really not that much time of this, maybe a week or two, Anthony gets attacked in the middle of the night on a mission, sleeping by the fire, and Anthony gets attacked, and his eye gets cut out. His right eye gets cut out. He's attacked, and it leaves him scarred both physically and mentally. So, Anthony, after that, kind of stops talking about it. Like, he discusses it a little, but he's gone quiet about it. But then, after witnessing other atrocities on Hell's Ranch and jobs that they've done, Anthony starts to pick up on it again and starts yapping again. He starts talking about it. He starts telling people that maybe we should leave while we can. And in that, Anthony gets kidnapped and is held captive, and terrible things are done to him 1888 January into September. So in September, Hummel, quote unquote, which, oh my god, and now I'm saying all this and it's like you people don't know who any of these people are. I will do videos, I promise. Hummel, one of our other characters, who's known Anthony for a while, he's been at the ranch longer than almost anyone. Almost. Quote unquote, finds Anthony, he's known where he's been this whole time, but then tells, like, Goldie and Chester and their medic that, hey, we need to go rescue him. So they rescue him. Again, horrible things have been done to him. It takes him a very long time to recover. So later on, so about a month after the rescue, Anthony and pretty much the whole posse is like, Anthony needs to go home. He doesn't need to be in a chaotic environment. He needs to be somewhere quiet. So Hummel agrees to let him stay at his house and, like, with his wife and children, and this is where Clara meets Anthony and Chester for the first time. Anthony initially didn't want to go to his parents' house because he didn't want them to worry. So that's why they go to basically a stranger's house. Clara and Chester take care of Anthony. They get him back to good health, and then in February of 1889, so Anthony's 21, Hummel admits to Anthony that it was his idea to have him sent to this awful place. A fight ensues, Chester threatens him, and Clara kicks him out. So then Anthony decides, actually, I am gonna go to my parents' house because what the fuck? So he goes to his parents' house, and Chester pretty much just rides there with him to make sure he gets there safe. After a few months for revenge, goes back to the guy who made him captive, bad things happened, so hangs him from the balcony, and leaves a ton of witnesses. So now Anthony is wanted dead or alive for $4,000 because he killed a well-known rich person. He returns to Hell's Ranch, probably in, like, late summer, early fall, so probably, like, August, and returns back to work. He's not himself at all. The whole posse, the whole gang is kind of like, they're trying to make the best of his new normal, and Anthony's doing the same. He's really trying to make the best of it. Anyway, and then that is where our story begins in 1890, is pretty much everything about Anthony. I post Salunatics on Webtoons, so follow me at Salunatics55, and I will probably start posting the first chapter after I get the character videos done. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble and be a little cringe. So, I hope you have a good rest of your day or week or whatever you got going on. So, bye!